Hello, everyone. Welcome to this conversation. It's a conversation to mark the week of world peace, prayer for peace for Israel and Palestine. And I'm joined on the screen here by three fabulous women who I'm all really proud to call friends. Let me introduce them to you. So Judy, could you give us a wave? Which one is Judy A? One that says Judy quite clearly on her name tag. She's a Jewish community professional and she is the co-chair of the Alliance of Jewish Women. Judy, you're very welcome with us.
Thank you.
Julie, can you give us a wave?
Hello.
Julie? Julie works in faith communities across the UK and she facilitates discussions and work particularly around gender and faith. And she is a co-founder of the Nisa Nashim, the Jewish and Muslim Women's Network. Julie, you're welcome with us.
Thank you.
And Barbara doesn't really need much introducing to the Methodist folks here. She is very well known to us as our current Vice President of the conference. She's got a background in schools and religious education. And Barbara, I'm really glad that you're able to be with us in this conversation too. Thank you. So the plan is that I'm going to ask you all the same question and let's hear your responses from your own personal perspectives on this. None of us have the answers to everything, but all of us have a personal story to tell and a personal perspective to give. So Judy, can I go with you first? Is that all right?
Sure, of course.
So my question is, where do you find hope for peace in the region?
Okay, so last Tuesday, together with my family, I was celebrating the Jewish New Year. A part of that, there were intense and impactful synagogue prayers in the synagogue and all the traditional foods that we like to eat, like apples dipped in honey for a sweet New Year. Tradition was very much the order of the day. In the run-up to the New Year 2 years ago, my trailblazing 23-year-old Shira, who lives in Jerusalem, chose to celebrate somewhat differently. She attended a rooftop interfaith service with friends of the three Abrahamic faiths in Jerusalem's Old City. And reflecting on the powerful experience, she wrote these words: "The next year stretches out before us, a blank page waiting to be filled. How we choose to fill it is up to us. Will we allow the rifts to deepen, or will we choose to pick ourselves up and build bridges across the divide? Will we survey the view of ancient Jerusalem with love or with hatred? Will we embrace the differences or fight to erase those we don't agree with?" I think Shira's desire to build bridges and embrace differences rather than fighting them is the perfect way to reflect my hope for peace in the region. These kinds of interactions where Israelis and Palestinians are able to get to know each other as human beings, conduct respectful dialogue, and create genuine relationships are where our dreams for peaceful coexistence and a thriving future will be realised. Reflecting on the past 12 months, there are so many hopeful signs. The historic first that we witnessed following the signing of the Abraham Accords, the UAE ambassador presenting his credentials in Israel, the Israeli and UAE national rugby teams playing their first ever match, these bring real hope for the region. The new Israeli government specifically is the first to include an independent Arab Israeli party as an official member of the governing coalition. And along with the involvement of parties that have been more supportive of Israeli-Palestinian peace efforts and a two-state solution, including Yesh Atid, Labour and Meretz, the way is being paved for a more cohesive future. So 2 years ago, Shira wished that we could celebrate the similarities instead of fighting over the differences. And the more we are able to do this, the closer the chance to peace in the region becomes.
Judy, thank you for that. Much appreciated and much love to your daughter.
Thank you.
Julie, would you like to go next? It's the same question. Where do you find for peace in the region?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Judy, as well, for sharing that really beautiful reminder from a young person, which of course is often where we sometimes need to look when we become older and more cynical, perhaps. So I am an optimist by nature, and I find that sometimes with topics like this, it can become testing and difficult to remain optimistic, but I do remain optimistic. And I think that a few things that come to mind when I'm thinking about this question, and particularly, I guess, reflecting on what happened in the last sort of 4 or 5 months, which of course always has an impact in this country. And I think it had probably more of an impact on people this time than I've ever seen before. And there'll probably be various reasons for that. So I think it's people that give me hope and continue to do so, and very much so this year. So people who refuse to be told that change won't come, people who, particularly in that part of the world, who are actually going through things remain hopeful and try and find ways, as we've just heard, to make those connections, however small they might be, but still remain very significant, and look for, you know, rays of light, I guess, in difficult circumstances. Those people, for me, I have huge admiration for. You know, sometimes it's easier to not do that. Of course, it's normally much easier to not do that. And I think that those that do it, you know, always get my love and respect and keep the rest of us going. And I think also people in communities here, so, and particularly women, I have to say, and particularly in the last 4 or 5 months, people who really found it very, very difficult to navigate what was happening there and how does that play out here. People who are building bridges here and, frankly speaking, felt like they wanted to jump off the bridge. Well, of course, at that point, it's for people like me to say, please don't jump off the bridge now, hang on even harder than you normally do. And those people who did that and refused to listen to those people who actually try and say, this is not complex. So there are those that among us that say, this is not complex, it's straightforward, it's A or B. Well, of course it isn't. It's not binary. It's much more complicated than that. And those people that refuse to listen to those people that say it's not complex, I have a lot of respect for. And of course, we hear a lot of noise, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. We need to remind ourselves we've been given 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in that order. And listen to the people on the ground there, and listen to those who really do try and remain hopeful. And obviously there's a lot of injustice, we get it. Things can be better, but as we've already been reminded already today, and we need to constantly remind ourselves that things will change and different things will happen. And also that all of us, I think, have goodness in us to do something about this. You know, when it feels too overwhelming, that's when we all think, okay, we don't want to do this anymore. But actually, if we don't, then who is going to do this? You know, some people have to do things differently. Some people have to make those connections in ways that others are not willing to do. And I believe those are the brave people, and those are the people that give me hope.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. Barbara, over to you. The same question. Where do you find hope for peace in the region?
Thank you, and hello everybody. And I think I'm very much going to pick up on things that Judy and Julie have said. I think I want to begin by acknowledge that what I want to say is both very personal, and that I acknowledge that this is not a situation to which I am close in that same way. And like Judy, I don't have close family who are in the region. And I know that that gives people a different perspective. Sometimes it's easy for outsiders to pontificate about something, and for people inside the situation say, well, you know, what do you know about it? And I acknowledge that I am speaking personally, and also that I'm speaking from outside, and that's actually where I'm locating the sort of source of hope. Because I also recognise that for whatever reason, our 3 separate faiths have ties to this land that we call a holy land, and that the city of Jerusalem is important to all of us, and that overlays the situation with the concerns of people across the world. And in one sense, that obviously adds complications. But I suppose that for me, that's also a source of hope, because it means that people who are hands-on in trying to create a more secure peace are not just abandoned to get on with it. In some of the world's other difficult situations, you hear people say, the rest of the world has abandoned us. And yet in this situation, there are people who are surrounding the situation with prayer, and touching on what you said, Julie, a sort of a less frayed desire for good, that once you are in the situation, and when you have daily annoyances or grievances on a small or very big scale, it's sometimes hard to keep your eye on the possibility of good. And I think that those of us who are more outside the situation can also hold that sort of light of good and surround the situation with our prayers and good wishes and broader perspectives. And I think another thing that gives me hope is that although the situation in the region is unique and it has its own history and it has its own complications, etc., it's not the only difficult situation which human beings have faced as humanity and come through. In the UK, I think of the situation in Northern Ireland, in recent years, the situation in the former Yugoslavia, and in constantly the situation in South Africa, and we could always name several. And all of these are different. And they're different from this one, but in all of them, I think there's situations where we thought, gosh, this is so hard. How can this ever come good? How can people ever be reconciled? How can there ever be a conciliation that works? But in all of these, that human desire to live well and to have better beyond the past and beyond what goes on in the present, that's brought people through to something which is more reconciled. And although sometimes it's very fragile, and sometimes every day the people in that situation, and I'm lucky because it ain't me, but the people in that situation have day by day to recommit to all those things that build reconciliation. And that's very hard and easy for me to speak about. And yet it still happens. And I hold on to that because it shows me that good is possible. Within British Methodism, even in our lower stakes environment, we're trying to work across our divides. Issues that matter hugely to us are ones that divide us sharply and deeply. And yet we're trying to work out what it means to disagree well. What does it mean to live with contradictory convictions? The world cannot go forward. It can't agree. It's always going to disagree. We cannot go forward without we learn how to live with other people with whom we profoundly and deeply don't agree. Disagreeing, but together. And I also have hope, and I'm just delighted with what Judy shared, because although they're not always the most loudly broadcast, I know that there are stories of people in the region creating small acts of community and conciliation across divides, and meeting and eating and crafting and doing and working together. And all these are happening. And they're providing those opportunities for relationship making, where you know the colour of the other person's eyes. And it's on those foundations of human relating and friendship and reconciliation and conciliation that I think my hope is founded.
Thanks, Barbara. I'm going to ask each of you now if you'd be able to offer a prayer from your own tradition into the situation that we find ourselves. But before I do that, I think I'd want to say again, thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing as honestly and beautifully as you have done. I found it exceptionally moving and helpful too in my own reflections. We'll go in the same order if that's all right. Judy, would you mind going first? Thank you.
Sure. So I've chosen a prayer from Sefer Tehillim, which is the book of Psalms, and chapter 133. It's a very short chapter, it only has 3 verses, but it's the first verse that I'm going to focus on. And in this chapter, King David is talking about the state of idyll and peace and blessing that will exist when everyone lives together, all the people in the land live together as brothers. I think it's probably referring to Jewish people, but I would like to expand it out to refer to all the people that live there. And I'm going to read the first verse in Hebrew and then in English. Shir HaMalos LaDavid, Hene Matov Umanayim Sheves Achim Gam Yachad. A song of ascents by David. Behold how good and how pleasant is the dwelling of brothers in unity. And then I'll just turn to the final few words of the last verse of this chapter. Kisham tzivah Hashem es habracha chayim ata olam. For there God has commanded the blessing. May there be life forever.
Thank you, Judy.
Yeah,
Judy, I'd like to invite you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start with the first verse of the Quran in Arabic, and then I'll translate it into English. And it's the verse that Muslims say in every prayer, and is essentially the opening of the Quran. So I'll first do that, and then I'll say some few words of personal prayer. But thank you for the opportunity to do this together. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen. Praise be to God, Lord of the worlds, the most compassionate, the most merciful, Master of the day of judgment. It is you we worship and you we call for help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those who you have blessed, not of those who are misguided or who have gone astray. Dear God, please forgive my shortcomings and mistakes when trying to do my best in your name. Guide me and those I work with to be people who can be trusted, who others feel safe with, who do things with integrity and honesty. I pray that you make it easy for those who are suffering in the region and bless those who are trying to bring about peace. I pray for those around the world who want to use their voices and their hands for good, to speak up against injustice, even when that becomes very difficult. I pray sincerely to you, beloved God, that I can follow the path of Muhammad and the other messengers and prophets, peace be upon them all, who all faced hardships, but kept going on the mission that you had set for them. I pray that we can remain hopeful and thankful to you, because surely that is a way we can worship you and remain grateful for everything we have, while remembering those who have less than us. Please put blessing in this gathering, put love in the hearts of those who are part of this, and patience and inner strength for those who are struggling to stay focused on doing what they feel is right. And thank you for bringing me together with these good people who I see as peacemakers doing this work in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Julie. And Barbara.
I'd like to share a prayer which is not my own. It's a prayer written by somebody who is also a poet, and his name is Pablo Gotoma. But one of the roles that he's fulfilled in his life is that he was in charge of the Coromila community. Mm-hmm. And Coromila was a place where people sought to build a different way of going forward as people of faith in the midst of the situation in Northern Ireland. And these are his words, but written in a Christian context. Jesus, you shared peace around a table of anxiety, peace with the bread, peace with the wine, peace in the face of the uncertain, peace in the place of pain. May we share tables of peace in places of pain, sharing food and friendship and words and life, because you came to a fearful world and found your place around those tables. Amen.
Thank you, Barbara. As head of mission, the Methodist Church in Britain, it's been an absolute delight to be able to pull three of my friends together to have this conversation. It's been a real privilege and I'm really grateful. I'm ever so sorry that there's no food that we can share, because that would have been the icing on the cake, as it were.
Next time.
And it next time. Next time. We should definitely meet up. I know Julie and Judy very well. I know Barbara very well too, and I know that the three of you would get on like an absolute house on fire. We could probably change the world between us.
Indeed.
It's been a huge privilege. Thank you so much, and I will see you again in real life at one point, I hope and pray soon. Thanks.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Thank you, sisters.
Thank you.